All right. Welcome, everybody, on the internet, as well as here at Mahogany Books. My name is Derek Young. I am one of the owners here of Mahogany Books. This is Mahogany Books Book Club discussion featuring our November book, Revolutionary Suicide, written by Huey P. Newton. This is a classic, one of my all-time favorites. We're getting started here. We have some people who are dealing with DC traffic, so they will be making their way in, including my co-host here, Panama. We have everyone here, and we're going to get started. My favorite book of all time. I keep saying that. I will say it again. This was definitely my pick for the book club. I haven't read this book. It's been, I don't know, like 1997 something when I last read this book, and it I won't say quite literally, but it put me on the path I am on today. And rereading it just brought back all the energy and the what's the word? The not inspiration is another word for it, but the it really recentered me on how I want to live my life. And I recommend this book to everybody because I think when you break out what is being said, there's a lot of complexity here. There's a lot of good Huey, bad Huey. We're not going to deny any of that. But it is definitely worth having a conversation and digging through so that hopefully for each reader, you can uncover what it is that you're willing to give your best self for, right? And that's what I really took from this book. The whole idea of revolutionary suicide and what that means. So let's just throw it to the room. I'm a little scared to ask. I've already told people here, and as they continue to come in, I'll let them know there are right and wrong answers to all of my questions in this book. And I'm taking names. I'm keeping score because if the right answer is not given, I will feel some type of way. So I'll just start with your first impressions. I don't want to like load it. Brianna, you scream from the back side as well. First impressions. Did you feel like I feel about this book?
Well, I feel like I understand why the book impacted you that way.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I said earlier, I think that all young Black people should read this book right around that 15 age, because I think he does a good job of describing his feeling, like his experiences of like how the system has made him feel like he didn't belong, and like just like all the feelings that came up in him and how he managed them, the choices that he made, that sometimes were in rebellion and sometimes that he's acknowledging were kind of like, I just was sad. Like my feelings were hurt, and so this is what I did. And that like I had a lot of work to do on myself. At the same time, understanding the systemic things, but also recognizing that there were things that like were character things he needed to work on. And so, and the way he thought about the different places that he got influence. And I think for me, that was especially interesting the way he dissected like his Sonny from Melvin, from the guys on the street, like like it was just like he saw the good in all of them, and then was able to do the drawbacks, like that's too far on the rebellion. And I feel like that puts me in a different kind of prison than where I was in before. And so like I just appreciated his willingness to show the good and the bad of himself in a very blunt way.
Yeah.
But the kind of reader that I am, and part of my ADHD, I appreciate the chapters were all really short because it made me I was making like just move on to the next thing as opposed to like these like long drawn out chapters. So I definitely appreciate that kind of like writing like the book style in that way. But yeah, I definitely appreciated his willingness to be transparent about the totality of his humanity around like all the things. How he became an organizer, kind of reluctantly, but not like he knew something needs to be done. But it's kind of like we keep talking about all these organizations who's not doing nothing. I guess we should do something. Yeah. Because we keep telling everybody about not doing nothing, just having meetings and talking, and it seems like that's what we keep doing over here at everybody else. So we should probably
actually
do something.
I think so. The first place I wanted to start with this book is the manifesto. I think that's the most like important piece of the entire work because it is, number one, short, succinct enough that there's a lot of meat there for how a person just to like have that as a discussion piece and think through what it means like in the context of American history, right? Because I find it very ironic that America demonizes white America demonizes Huey Newton and the Black Panther Party for this idea of revolutionary suicide, but it lauds all of the quote unquote founding fathers of the American Revolution for having the same idea that give me liberty or give me death, right? The same thing that I want to live with dignity and I'm willing to put everything on the line for it to found this country that allows me the freedom
to have slaves without being taxed for it.
Boom.
All of my money.
Right. But when a black man says it, oh no, that's a step too far. Them guns, it's a step too far. Your humanity, your freedom, your dignity, you can't fight for it, right? And I think that's a piece. Just to even dissect that is, I think, a huge discussion. But given where we are today and the complexity that I found it to be, it was. I walked into the book romanticizing the Black Panther Party and Huey P. Newton as a young man. Reading it, you're like, oh crap, this dude has some problems, right? This organization has some problems, right?
Say the least.
Yeah. So to have a conversation about history and its complexity and not just throw it away, oh, we can't read it, we can't have a conversation about it. It's too heavy for people. Like rereading this reminded me that you can actually have a conversation about history and historic figures, people who made an impact and still have a conversation about their demons, about where they came up short. And it doesn't, and just like I said, well, his complexity of looking at people and saying, hey, this is the good things I want to take from this person, and those are the bad things I want to leave with that person. And as a society right now, it's like, conservative white folk don't want to have that conversation, but this shows that you can write a history book, a autobiography, and deal with all the complexity, and nothing happens, right? Like the sky doesn't fall, America doesn't crumble. It's just the facts are the facts. That's what it is, and you can have an honest, open, adult conversation about it. So I think I want to kind of start there. After again. I want to get everyone's initial thoughts, and I'll continue to repeat. There are right and wrong answers. This is my favorite book of all time, Jackie.
Oh, really?
It 100% is.
Interesting.
This is as I open up, and I think I've said this several times.
I thought it was between the world and me.
The beautiful struggle.
Oh yeah, the beautiful struggle. Yeah, that's right. Definitely.
Because of the entire manifesto piece is what separates it from me. Because again, my backstory with it is I read it my, let's say, sophomore, junior year in college. And as a person still trying to find himself and to have to sit down and wrestle with the idea of what is it that metaphorically, I'm willing to put my life on the line for, right? Like I know I'm not willing to go out there and just die for something, right? I want to live my best life for something. And as I went through all the different things that was important to me, I realized I want to build something for my community, right? And then all that started culminating into what became Mahogany Books. So for me, that manifesto piece is what clearly defined, okay, this is how I need to think about life and how I need to kind of put myself on a course to be able to provide for my family, but also give back to my community, right? So that's the thing for me that sets it apart. So I'll leave it there.
I already gave my first.
Yes,
So you're.
So I read this before
Mm-hmm.
a long time ago, and I remember thinking, oh, I really like this book, right? But now I'm reading it again. I wasn't feeling it. Let me tell you, I wasn't feeling it. I appreciate the story, but it felt like, so when I started reading it, I got to the end, I'm realizing he's like 23, 24.
Mm-hmm.
When he goes to jail and all that. It made it appear that the Black Panther, them starting the Black Panther, was based on these young dudes, 23, 24, thinking they're smart. He's reading a lot of stuff. He thinking he's smart. Y'all just sat down real quick and came up with these 10 points, which were good, but it didn't feel like it was on a solid foundation, the Black Panthers. This feel like some young dudes who, you know how you're young and you trying to do your thing? This is what that felt like when I read it. Even when he was saying like with his parents, he got good parents. I just wanted to find my daddy. Remember he finally with his daddy. And then the whole jail part and all that. Y'all just being reckless to me. And then the very end, he says, we were kind of putting off Black people by being with the guns and all that. Like we kind of were. I needed more from him, but I had to realize he's young at the time, 23, 24. I just didn't have respect for him and what he was doing. I understand the problematic part, but when he starts talking about the Black Panther, it feels like y'all weren't grounded in what you were doing, even though it was needed, right? Because they had the 7 points, but you only focused on the police part, right? And then it just felt like some 24-year-olds trying to do something big. That's what that felt like to me. Mm-hmm. After reading it, I respected the Black Panthers a lot less this time because it feels like, y'all know those little young college kids when we were like trying to protest or something in college? We thought we were doing it during then. When you go back and look at it grown, some of the stuff we were protesting probably should have been done differently, but we didn't know because we thought we were doing what we knew to do at 24. Right? When I think about the Black Panthers, remember he said SNCC was like, no, we ain't fooling with y'all. SNCC was organized. They had Ella Baker, other people, grown folks advising them, organizing about it. They weren't about to compete with this. Remember he said they were like, no, we ain't fooling with y'all. Because they appeared to be hot-headed people who were just out of control a little bit. I just felt like we needed more from him, but I had to realize at the end, this is a young kid writing a book to me. This is a young kid writing a book. Like, but some points were good when he said about being married. It's like his daddy was always paying the bills. I understood that. But then he realized he was exploiting women. He made some good points here and there. It just left a lot to desire for me. And I just felt maybe it's because he's young at the time. Like the going to jail part and all that, like, it's so ridiculous. All that could have been avoided. To me. Mm-hmm. Like, you're in college. And I grapple with that. Like, you don't want to get too educated till you can't relate to the folks on the street. Like, you want to have, for me, I always try to have a balance. You don't want to be talking about people that you don't know. I don't want to be marching for y'all and I don't know. You know what I mean? So I understood that part. He's problematic to me. This time, no respect for even like now the start of the Black Panther after reading this. It felt like young boys trying to do something, thinking they're smart. Because he read all those books. Trying to think he's smart. That's kind of my takeaway. I wasn't feeling it this time. Too much about the jail part too. Like all the other chapters was like 4 pages. We got to jail, it was like 20 pages. That felt like, it was too much.
I didn't read it the second time around. I read it a long time ago too. I don't remember it being one of my favorite books. To be fair, I'm in flux. I'm not in my house. One of my children destroyed my copy of the book, spilled my wife's coffee all over it. After that, I was like, that's a sign.
That's a sign. You ain't missing none.
Well, it's funny, but I can't speak directly to that. So I'd be curious to hear more about why it is one of your favorite books. But it is funny because I did read Seize the Time, right? I remember I read that multiple times, and I remember the more I read it, the more problematic I found some of the stuff. So I wonder if I would have the same reaction reading this again. I didn't realize he was that young when he wrote this. I actually didn't remember that at all. I guess I read it in college too.
And see, that's what got me. I was thinking they were all the way grown, like 30 something.
I mean,
but this
in
is
the 70s, 24 is grown.
It was grown at the same
60s,
time.
actually, the 60s.
But think about it. But it wasn't grown because remember he was still in college. He would go to class. He's reading these books. When they started Black Panther, he literally said they sat down like 20 minutes and wrote those 10 points out. They only decided to focus on 7 about the gun stuff. What about the other 9? Right? And I think there was a need for what they were doing at the time. But it felt like those people who say like 9/11, people ran their car, the plane, they were willing to die. He said, I knew doing this, I got to be willing to die. So they almost went into it thinking, I'm okay with dying regardless, because he said that Malcolm X's death caused him to do the Black Panther. So he's like, if I die, it's okay because maybe it'll spark something, the next group of people to do something. It felt almost like the 9/11 people, like I'm willing to kill myself in the building for a greater cause. That's what that kind of felt like in the end. Almost just like remember he said, you want to do this, you got to be willing to die.
But I think,
Go ahead.
I think that's the point, right? And I feel like there's a reason why most movements start in college.
Yeah.
In the age group is because you don't have a family. You don't have these things
Out of fear.
Make you be like, let me stay in the house, because, right? And kind of like help move things forward because there's a bravado in youth that older people don't have. They just don't have it, right? I think about some things I did in undergrad. Now I would never.
That's what I was saying.
If I was in college when George Floyd happened, honey, Abdul would have seen me on television. I think, hey, fool. Do you hear me? But I think there's a reason for that, and I think what this book shows, and things show over and over again, is what happens that we still haven't figured out yet as a community how to have like multiple generations of organizations together.
Yes.
Where
they needed some grown folks.
We can because the grown folks don't listen to the kids because they think they know more, they know everything, which alienates the kids, the young people. And then the young people
they know everything too.
They're coming up with novel things like you just got here.
Well, they also think old people move too slow.
Yes.
They're ready to go,
and
ready for action.
And they're willing to risk less, like you said in the very beginning. That doesn't create the significant change.
Yes.
Sometimes older folk are willing to do incremental change, but for the kids who, like when he's sitting there talking about, like at one point he's living in a house that had the floor was like dirt or cement, right? Like that's like, so it's, to me, it feels very hip hop Gen X, right? To me, it's almost like I get why, like a lot of like, I would say maybe older Gen X rappers in the early years really kind of talk or gravitate towards the Black Panther Party, because the issue is you have a civil rights movement, you have a nonviolent civil rights movement, and there is change, but is it significant enough, right? Is this really ultimately getting me out of what he was talking about, the hopelessness, right? I'm going to school and I feel hopeless in the situation. I feel like you're not teaching me anything. You're not presenting me with an opportunity to really be able to, like you talked about in the beginning of the book, the difference between the different areas of Oakland.
Yeah.
Right? How do I go from where I am right now to over there? And the teachers aren't showing me how to get there. So I grow up with this resentment. I get to a place where I start learning something new. I'm reading all these revolutionaries. I'm living in an age where poor people across the globe are pushing back against, right, these empires. And the thing is that for a lot of us, for people now, and a lot of people there, what they're looking at is what they see is an American government that is more of an empire, an imperialistic state that is about exploiting majority of people for the benefit of minority of people, right? And if I'm 22, 23, 24, I felt the same way when I was I feel the same way now. I'm just trying to figure out what is my way of pushing back against it. And for them, like you said, Fidel Castro, all these other revolutionaries, if you're really, I've watched MLK, I've watched Malcolm X, I've studied Marcus Garvey. There hasn't been the significant change that I need for myself. So it's like, I need to go to a bigger extreme. And you're right to a certain extent. When you have, people who become terrorists, whatever, what is it that they're looking for? They're pushed to a certain extreme. It's not to, apologize for them.
Right.
But what is happening is there's such a sense of hopelessness in them that they're willing to go to ridiculous extremes.
Right. That's what this felt like.
To switch something up. Right.
Like Gucci Mane. Y'all read his book?
No.
Okay, read the book. It's a good book. It's no different than that. Like Gucci Mane at the time, feeling like young, I'm gonna do all this and then go to jail and blah blah blah. This felt the same way. Like this dude eventually knew he was gonna go to jail. It's almost, I felt like he was just I'm gonna do all I can so I can go to jail.
Right. But think about it. And that's the thing is that.
And I agree with you. I think that as you get older, you get cautious. That's why when Dr. King did his thing, who was following? College kids. If it's there is always going to be the younger people, and I agree with what he said at the end. How do you get a heel? He said, how do you get a mouse in the fall? You keep digging at the bottom. Eventually it's going to tumble. He said, so we did our dig, and we hope the next generation dig, keep going, and then the mouse in the fall. Right? It's to keep digging, but young folks feel an urgency, thank God, because they push it hard. And they go as far as they can, and then some more young folks come, push it hard as they can. But in this book, he wanted to die. That's what it felt like. All of them knew it was gonna happen. Like even like now, he said, I didn't think I was gonna get out of jail. Like they let me out. He was tripping out. Like I can't believe I'm getting out of jail.
I think they're more accepting of it, not because that was one of the things talked about in the beginning in the manifesto, is that he didn't want to lose his life, but in the service. What if I'm gonna lose my life anyway? And what am I willing to lose it in the service of? Right? If I'm walking around, like, come on, man, we're in Southeast, right? People hungry, people get jacked up by the cops. If this is what you're seeing every day, and this is, dude, I don't know if I'm gonna get past 21. People really ask, what are you gonna do when you grow up? Dude, am I gonna get there? Like, if that's people's real experience and what they're really feeling, we see what happens, right? That there's two ways you go. You either just throw it all to the wind and, hey, I'm gonna go get what's mine, or you try to find a more positive way to go about it. And so for me, that's what, like, it really gets at the humanity of the situation. Yeah. So that's why I point to, like, at the founding of America or any country. When we talk about revolution, what drives it? It's people's hopelessness. Yeah. People feeling like there's nothing else for me to do but to fight. And at this point, it's like we know that the truth is that again, this is my favorite. So it's really like, and not saying that what you're saying is wrong, but I can really speak on a lot because I think it really speaks to what most Black people are feeling.
I agree.
And then you have to make a choice, right? And I love the fact that he poses this idea of revolutionary suicide to a Black and white question. if you know tomorrow, or if you know in 10, whatever, that life is going to end, what is it in service of? Is it is it in service of selfish ideas that you just about me? I'm gonna get mine no matter what I do to you and your family, or to you and your family, or is it about how do I live a life of benefit that impacts and empowers other people?
Yeah.
And to me, you can live a revolutionary life, and again, not necessarily put your life on a line, literally, but okay, maybe I'll become a pastor, right? I become a business owner, right? I become a school counselor. I become a writer. There's all these other ways of living your life in a socialist idea of benefiting the community, right? And I think that's what this book really gets at in terms of the idea of what revolutionary suicide is or can be, if you really, again, talk about it in those terms. That it's not just throwing your life out there, it's I'm actually going to do something. I'm sorry, this will be my last thing I say. This is important. I'll get back to opening the floor up. But I was reading this at a time that Pac and Big were murdered. So to see two other people who, as a young guy, I'm like, oh my God, this is it. Throw your W's up, West Side, whatever, hit them up, and this dude to be murdered at a very young age. His life was gone. Again, it puts me in a position of questioning, what is really most important to me, right? And those were the things that kind of juxtaposing reading this and seeing that happen. It really kind of, okay, you know what? For me, there's a upper limit of where I'm willing to go. And so within those boundaries, what can I do to live a life of significance?
Agreed. I was thinking, if let's say like Ta-Nehisi Coates did that whole thing on reparations in Atlantic, that pretty much got the conversation going. Mm-hmm. So in that case, they say somebody killed him because he wrote about reparations and they're against it. That would be revolutionary suicide. That's something that he believes in. I'm gonna write it, even if it means I'm gonna die. I'm talking about it. I'm willing to. I'm willing, but it is. It's a responsibility. So even with them, it just felt like they wanted. He knew it was gonna happen eventually. They almost wanted to die because remember everybody was gone by the end. Toni Morrison says a man has to decide what he's willing to die for. I totally agree with that. I just think when you're young, sometimes you feel invincible and powerful. You know what I mean? It can be misguided. This felt a little bit misguided. Like they they could have probably benefited from a little wisdom. Like you said, multi-generations in there trying to, because you want them to be extreme, because we get conservative as we get old, but you may need a voice of reasoning in there, like, okay, wait a minute. Y'all are going over there with the police and watch this family, but be mindful of this. Or, somebody just to kind of caution them, to kind of ground it some. Because, we were all young and foolish and thought, I'm going to do something crazy. Then you get older, you realize maybe it could have been a different approach. Or you did it some. But it is what it is.
I think the multi-generational thing, though, is more for structure of the organizations and around like strategizing. I think I work in higher ed, and when I listen to my students talk, they really think that they're inventing things, right? That like this, and they have these all these like novel ideas, and I'd be like, that's not, people did that already, right? Because they think old people move too slow and do these things that they don't even bother to like do any research or get history about like what happened before they arrived in the space. But I don't know if actually older people need to be part of the day-to-day, because there's some things that you have to embark upon without the caution. Because if I'm about to run out the door, like when the young man came, like the police were in his house, and I'm like, now before you go over there, just know that these things might happen. You'd be like, oh damn, right? Like that will kind of like.
But you don't, as a grown person, like even with young folks, I don't want to be in the day-to-day. I don't. But you may want to come for wisdom every now and then.
Yeah, I was
You see what I'm saying? So the people may not be
structure
like
around
Ellen Baker. She went on the ground every day with Snick. She was that voice of reasoning, though. Have y'all thought about this? You know, kind of helping them see, okay, maybe y'all, but she went on the ground with them. But just that voice of reasoning, maybe, I know some grown folks that may, y'all trying to do that with the police. I may know a grown person with some connections that can help y'all get that done without you dying. You know, just a little bit of guidance, a little bit of wisdom. And the young folks today, and it's been forever. I didn't want it. You don't want to hear it. You think you know. I ain't want to hear it. I know what I'm doing, and old folks don't know. It's the nature of being young, which we need that, because in every profession, like even in education, every time new people come in, they push it. You know that, but we didn't try that already, but they trying it anyway. You let them do it because they made then a little bit. Then some more young folks come in. We like everybody done tried that. We can't. They don't want to hear it. They push it a little bit further. You need it. You need that youngness to push it a little bit forward. Because you do get more conservative. Not conservative. You got more to lose as you get older, and you know some of this stuff don't
hit the way you think it's gonna.
It ain't gonna change, and it don't change overnight. Like you almost got to learn how to grind. It's turning, but it ain't gonna be overnight.
I mean, I agree with everybody saying. I don't. I as somebody who grew up as an ardent fan of the Panthers and who was one of them people who, when I was younger, was ready to risk it all for everything at any moment. And it's funny because I look back at myself now and I'm like, man, that ain't me at all. Right now, like, I guess I believe in incremental change now because I realize sometimes that's how it has to work. Like the walls that I would be willing to drive through, I'm like, yeah, might mess up my car. You know, like maybe that's not the best way to go about it. So I know I'm mad I didn't reread this or didn't get a chance to reread this book too, because hearing y'all talk about it makes me think like when I first read it, I was that age or younger. What's it like to read it now in the position I am as somebody who felt like that, you know, was very upset, believed in, like, I don't even know if I was trying to change anything. I was just trying to piss people off. And I was always trying to be, I wanted to be seen and I wanted to be, I had like a red, black, and green Confederate flag shirt made. And I used to walk around Alabama with that shirt. Like I would go to places specifically. I didn't have a reason to be there, but I'm like, I want people to see, I want somebody to say something to me. Like I actively want somebody to say something. Like I'm over here trying to find a fight. And there was no change. There was nothing I was looking for out of that. I was just trying to piss people off. And I'm like, I don't even feel that way anymore. I turn my stereo down when I'm next to cars. Like I don't want to offend you. I kind of probably need to read this and be like, man, I wonder what the version of me that felt like my view of what the Panthers were at that age, which is what I'm basing it on. And a lot, because I also read David Dennis's book, right? You know, The Movement Made Us. What?
Yes, I want to go back to that.
There's a lot.
I love that book.
And you know, there was a lot of that kind of stuff in there too, right? They were all going to jail. They were all like, you know, I believe in that. I believe in the idea that sometimes you just got to break things in order to draw attention to it. And I feel like a lot of that was happening in every one of these organizations. Like all of them were doing it. Some of them did it with a shirt and tie on. Mm-hmm. Some of them did it with guns at the Capitol. They were all doing the same thing in their own different ways. You know, I think the politics of their aesthetic got in the way of some of the people working together, the believing that, you know, we're better than them. We're more respectability politics played into it or something. But yeah, I think all this stuff is fascinating. Somebody who has students now who do think they've invented the wheel. I do find that entertaining. But you also need that energy. You need the energy. You need the people who think that they did it first to go out there and try to convince other people they did it first. You know, it's like, all right, well, go take the youthful energy over there, and I'm just gonna stand back and watch. And then I'll walk through the hole that you created, because that way I can go get where I'm trying to go. So.
I mean, I want to just circle back to this. I think, and I have no idea because I really don't. I never cared into this exact moment, but it was really to try to put it in context in terms of the point. Like, how old were Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Parvier, all those white dudes?
Well, George was old as hell.
Okay.
I mean, well, he died at like 60 something, but he died like 8 years after he left the presidency. So he was up there in age.
Okay. So for the people who were part of this American Revolution, right? To me, it does. You need both. Like I completely agree. But it is a revolution is mostly like a young person thing because you have to have that energy. All those kids who were sitting at desegregating those lunch counters and buses and all that stuff. It was a lot of young kids, college kids, who had this ideals, and they were on the front line, right? And then you had people, I forget the other book that I love, Black Titan, older conservative black guy in Alabama who was an entrepreneur who were paying their bail, right? So he was like, y'all moving too fast. He was saying this to MLK, right? Y'all moving too fast. But I'm still here and I'll support on the back end, right? So it took an entire breadth of people working to make things happen. But I think I always kind of like want to not necessarily push back, but make sure that when we talk about like revolutionary change, that we allow how we idealize and romanticize. I'm not saying we as in us, but how America idealizes and romanticizes these white folk that help to steal this land from the native indigenous folk and create this whole new country because of this idea of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, whatever it is, right? There are people who have been fighting this fight since they were brought here in chains with the same idea, fighting for the exact same thing. But yet when they talk about revolution or they take a gun to a place, right, and a militiaman does it now, do they get the same type of, are they looked at it in the same way, right? And to me, we're asking for the same thing, but again, when white folk do it, when they show up at the Capitol, they got people defending them. When people showed up in front of the Capitol for George Floyd, the president is saying shoot them with rubber bullets or whatever it is, right? They out there and they're treating them like they're terrorists and they're just protesting, right? So
that was fun.
We have to, I think, it's right size or just equalize the conversation that dignity and humanity should be for every person, and you don't get the right to fight for it with violence if needed and tell us to turn the other cheek while you spit in my face, right? That's the thing that really bothers me. And again, for me, this is the book that helped to kind of like pull all those kind of ideas together to help me like voice it and understand what I was feeling. So again, so I agree with you when you say like to have someone read this at 15, 16, 17, because it's about part of the conversation, because you might agree to disagree, right? Which is cool, but it gets you to really start thinking about what is most important, like freedom, dignity, all those things. You do have a right to it, and you have a right to fight for it.
I think this is a young person book. I do. I can see kids in college reading this. They, especially the ones who don't have fire. Maybe this will give you a little fire.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You may need a little fire to get you going. I think this is a young person. As a grown person, you think, this wasn't going to be a good end. And even like now, even today, we know, like, there's always going to be some back. It's going to be. Even Marion, what's her name, in Baltimore, the attorney general, that's going through all that about the loan she got and all that. Well, you went up against Freddie Gray. Remember the person that did that was bold about it. It's a backlash. Mm-hmm. It's going to be some backlash. I just wish she had just remembered it was going to be backlash and did everything by the book. You know, it's because you know it's coming. I think she must have forgotten. Now they get it.
But that's such a challenge, right? This idea of like, the only way I'm qualified to do this if I'm perfect. Like it's just not possible.
It's not possible unless you're Barack Obama.
Right. And
I'm just saying, even
some
like
people,
now,
and some people will argue that Barack Obama didn't do much.
but I'm just saying. But my point is that in his position, if he had made one wrong move, white folks would have drug him down.
He did.
Right.
He wore a tan suit.
Right, that tan
his
suit, right. He wore a tan suit.
And his
But if he had, like the Marion lady got a loan and bought a house like she did, even with his own money, and they would have found a crack in that, they would have got it.
I mean, I understand that. But
Anything he would have done, they would have got it.
I understand.
Tan suit.
Absolutely. But I think on some level, there has to be a way in which we liberate ourselves from that in the sense of like, we know what's going to happen anyway. Like, they're going to, he didn't do nothing. And
They're still trying to impeach him.
No, right. My whole point is that you cannot worry about it, but just know, like he just said in this book, when you're revolutionary, the blowback is coming. It may not be death, but you know something coming. And it may not be death, but typically some coming, they're going to drag you through the mud. Something going to happen, typically. Anyway, like Kaepernick, just all that. He came on the other end, but we know that. It's a price to pay. You almost hold your breath with people that's doing the work because you know if they can find something or even take your life, it's gonna happen. It's just there. So you have to be revolutionary suicide almost when you speak up. And it ain't even big names, it's little people. It's a price to pay. And most of us, like me, you willing to pay the price. You know it is what it is. And they were willing to pay the price. And he said it. He was okay with it. Remember at the end, he said, "I'm good when I die." He's like, "If I die, I'm good," because maybe it's gonna propel the next group. Like Malcolm, they said Malcolm X got them to start the Black Panther.
Right.
His death got them to start it.
So it's kind of part of what you're saying is it's okay to step into that space without the specter of having to be perfect, right?
I wish.
There are going to be mistakes made. Right, there are going to be things I say that's wrong. There's going to be people I offend. There's going to be, I thought whatever this loan or whatever it is financially that I did was going to be okay, and you know what? It wasn't. I made a mistake, right? But that's again, the complexity of being a person and thinking something was right and then it being wrong, or just making a mistake. I just got a little greedy in this moment. But that should not stop me from
doing the work.
Right, becoming active and trying something.
You can't let the fear, because you know it's coming, so you might just go and face it. It ain't no big deal. Most of us survive through it. Even a girl in Baltimore, she don't make it through it. It's just, you got to just go through it. And it's like you said, I wish we didn't have to live under that.
What is that term? What's that? It reminds me of two things. The thing that just jumped to mind, and I'm gonna probably say it wrong, but the whole idea of it's two things. One is like the black girl magic thing, right? So after a while, when that became a big
it ain't no damn magic
word or like way of talking, but some of the pushback I was hearing was we don't have to be magic.
And it ain't magic.
Why should we again romanticize these things when some of the stuff is just surviving, like just finding a way, right, to get through this thing when it's one of the hardest things. It's not magic. Like I'm just surviving, right? I'm crying my way through it. I'm hurt. Got trauma, whatever. I just figured out a way to make it through the other end, right? And there was something else that made me think of it too. But yeah, we don't have to be so that's what is kind of jumping in my mind about that. Of again, I was talking to someone, and this whole idea of romanticizing has been a keyword that keeps coming up. How we try to idealize stuff versus accepting people and things for who and what they are, right? And I think we need to have more of that.
It's interesting because as a Black woman who reads these things, it's always a challenge to to do the separation, because there's always a way in which the abuse of Black women shows up in these stories, that, you know, to like be able to stay with the like larger part, I have to like divest. I have to like let go of that part. And so that's always a challenge, isn't it? Because I'm like, I have to catch the women of the Black Panther Party up there. And to think for all these things, there always has to be like a separate volume.
Mm-hmm.
Because when the story is originally told, we're never in it, even though we was all up in it and through it.
Not one woman is mentioned in this book. Part of the Panther.
And it's like, so there's always has to be a separate volume for us, because they never mention us in the initial telling of the story. And so it's something to like grapple with, because my work is on like masculinity, and I always, my mind went straight there around like, a lot of this was part ego around like not getting to like experience and like to like feel like a man. Like they take that part of you away from when he was very small, right? Going through school, and it's like stripping that and trying to like find it. And that we very much pushing against this idea that like being a man means all you can do is produce. Like your manhood is centered around production, which is why he like lamented his father's life, because it was just like produce, and he could never produce enough. Because even the more he produced, the more he went into debt, the more he had to kind of like subject himself to be dehumanized. And it was this vicious cycle which he couldn't get out from under, because he had decided to take a wife and have children, and that there was a prison around being a provider. And so it was just kind of like, and I tried to identify with him there, and I understood exactly what he meant, and I got what he was saying around like, that's just not a road I want to go down around prison, of that, the imprisonment of that provider, constant production, but also the willingness to accept the labor and production of the Black women that you laid up with. Like you lived in this lady house for 5 years and didn't work. I said, next, I'm gonna be lying.
Is that the one who took the pills?
Yeah. 5
Yeah.
years. What one?
And he admits
not
I
two,
exploited
not
women.
5
And I'm like,
years. You laid up in this girl's house while she went to work and did the prison that you didn't want to be in. You like were fine accepting her prison labor. And so it was just like having to kind of like, let me set that aside.
and he basically dismissed that part too. When he talked about her taking the pills, he kind of dismissed it. I was like, dude, this lady took these pills, about to kill herself, living with you. And he that felt dismissive in the book.
So here's a
Polyamory discussion around.
And then later on, he said, "I was exploiting women, dude."
So here's a.
You saying this book didn't age well?
I didn't say that.
I'm wondering.
I didn't say that.
I'm wondering.
I didn't say that. This
So-
book aged well.
So I don't know if there's. I probably wouldn't say. To me,
I don't think so.
The interesting thing about that is, I think it's perspective, right? As you read as a Black woman, and then I read as a Black man, and for me, what I get from it is a cautionary tale. Is I hear from you, you're like, okay, my sister's being exploited. For me, it's like, I don't want to be that guy, right? So if he doesn't say it, if he doesn't put that in there, if he doesn't talk about his failure in that moment to do those things, I never get a chance to learn from someone's mistake, right? So I think so, and again, that's why I appreciate the story that he tells, that it is problematic, but that it gives me a chance to be able to learn from someone's faults as a Black man and say, you know what, this is not how you treat a Black woman, right? I think that's an important. To add to the context of like how you see it there. It's, for me, it's wrong that he did it, but I need that complexity in order to be able to learn.
Did you internalize it that way when you read it as a young person?
Yeah, because again, so what happened was, like I said at the beginning, was I came into it wanting to read all these Black Panther books. I was romanticizing the idea of the Black Panther Party. I finished this book. The next 2 books I read was Asada and Elaine Brown's Taste of Power. And those 2 books are in my top 10, right? So being able to read Elaine Brown and as she talked about it, dude, y'all got us over here just cooking, running these breakfast programs, and we can't even. I'm like, okay, I need to take a step back and understand that there are some good things they did and some not so good things they did. So if I'm going to build any organization, I have to become more objective and view everybody in the organization and not just come at it from strictly my subjective viewpoint. So for me, it was very helpful. But again, I'm a person that likes to learn from other people's
I think this is
experience.
I'm waiting.
Huh?
I'm waiting for you to say what I think.
I think you think it'll give you ammunition, right?
Huh? No. Well, I just don't. I don't think at a young age this stuff. Like for instance, Dr. Dre's The Chronic is one of my favorite albums of all time. I remember thinking as I got older that it's amazing that I don't hate women because I love this album. But my parents taught me better. I had enough respect growing up, but I don't think it made me think about this is not how I should treat women. It was just, this don't seem like how you do it either. Like my mother would be unhappy with me. So like, I didn't view most of the stuff that I read as a young person as very instructional or even helpful. It's just like I wouldn't go the extra mile of thinking this is how. I don't want to be this guy. I still want to be that guy. It's just like, man, that sucks for him. That didn't work. Can't do that. Got to do it a different way. Like it just, I think with age comes wisdom and all this. So like I read some of these books and that's why I said the thing about aging well, like, because some things you read now and I'm just like, Jesus Christ. Like, and I have the benefit of being somebody who's been writing for 20 plus years. So I can see some of the stuff that I wrote as a 20-some-year-old person. I'm just like, wow. People like me as a human back then, like, like that's amazing because I said some ridiculous things that I wrote from a space of that youthful, somewhat recklessness and this belief in, I don't even think it was ego on my end because I wasn't famous or nothing like that, but just this belief that what I had to say was that important, that it needed to be said and that the people who needed to hear it were going to because what I had to say was important, right? So I don't know, it's like I'm impressed that at a young age you could read stuff like that and then view it as instructional and I don't need to be like it's a cautionary tale. Like because I didn't believe in cautionary tales at 23, 24 or 18 whenever I would have read this stuff like cautionary tales. Just like, man, that dude's dumb. Here's what I would have done, but I learned from it. Like I was able to take the parts I wanted and just focus on those things and run with it. Like I didn't view the negative stuff as anything having to do with me. That was just part of their story. It wasn't anything that I had to do with. Like I couldn't look at. I just didn't believe in cautionary tales. And not as a young black man. Not as a young black man at Morehouse, where I'm being told how important I am. So when I'm reading these books that are making me believe that I can go change the world, all the problematic stuff in those things is just kind of secondary. Like I'm not problematic. I don't know that I'm problematic yet. Because when you're young, being problematic isn't really a thing. Maybe you're reckless and maybe you need to make a little bit better decisions, but you're not problematic. You're just finding your way. God ain't done with you yet.
I was thinking about this little boy that's out of control. I was like, I would love him to read this book. But then I thought, this probably wouldn't be a cautionary tale for him. This probably be a tale of, okay, he was robbing and stealing and went to jail and got out. I might be okay to keep doing what I'm doing. I didn't know if this would be a cautionary tale for this kid, I was like, oh, I'm gonna hold this one to the side because I don't know if he would see
Well,
it.
I think they can, but see,
I don't think this kid would. I think he would see it as
if
he
you
robbed
tell
and
this
stolen
person
and all
this
that,
is a
and they
cautionary
did.
tale, that's different. Most people don't enter these things with somebody guiding the way that they interact
So I
with
said,
them.
is he
Which is
like,
my point about like when I mentioned the chronic. Like my parents never had to say this is not how you treat women, but I had examples. I was around women all the time, and I just knew that if I called anybody a bitch or a hoe, it was going to be a problem. My big sister was going to whip my ass, and that was, you know, and I was afraid of her, right? So there was like they were 5 years older than me, taller and everything, right? So there was all like I had all these rails to stop me from becoming the worst version of myself, even as somebody who loved NWA and all that stuff. I had somebody to stop me. But if you don't have that, so if this kid discovers this thing on his own and is like, man, look at this story of rape, pillage, and murder, but everybody knows this person's name. Wow. Like how you come into something.
Yeah.
But if you instruct, like, this is a cautionary tale, because let me tell you, this story does not end well. This, however he was here, it's like he died as a crackhead, right? Like my man went out. Like all of the fame and infamy that he had at one point, he didn't die with any of it. Like he died as basically a pathetic human being. I mean, if we're gonna be honest about it, yeah. Like we have a lot. So that's the cautionary tale. Like the rest of the story becomes the cautionary tale with that type of stuff. But if you guide somebody in the reading and give them like the idea of what it is they're looking at, I think that can work.
Yeah.
As opposed to just somebody like me who's just thirsting for knowledge and picking up stuff and being like, man, because it's also funny. Like somebody need to do a study on this. Like, do all young black men read all the same damn books? Like, if you are somebody who even kind of reads, like we all read Asada, like we all read Elaine Brown's, all the people that I knew. So what I'm saying is not in the hood necessarily, but just like all the rappers who we think of as smart all reference the exact same books. When they make songs about the people, it's all the same people. Common made a whole song about Asada after he read the book, and he was like, "Man, I was so motivated. Let me go make a song for Asada." The song, you know, it's like what if there's just like this starter pack? Starter pack. Young black man starter pack of books. Like you go read, you read Asada, so you can say you read a book by a woman. You know, like it's
your starter kit.
There is.
It's gotta be.
Yeah, I do want to get to what you were saying because I don't know if Panama said what you were thinking. After what I said.
Partly in the sense of like I don't think that that's what happens. I think particularly what I find in working with colloquially in my life and really working with like existing with black men and like working with black boys is that there's a kind of like overarching narrative of the faults. Like men are faulted. They're imperfect beings, and that everyone should be in agreement and understanding that men are imperfect and not held to the standard of their imperfections, but to the other parts of them, which is necessarily a bad thing, right? You don't want, no one's perfect, but there's a way in which sometimes it allows men to not hold other men accountable because it's like, well, I'm not perfect, so who am I to talk about your imperfections?
We do that all the time.
Because I'm not perfect, so I'm not going to judge that man on the fact that he was, laying this lady couch, but I will, pay attention to the part that I do feel inspired by, which was him not being afraid of the police and like starting this organization. We're going to focus on that. And anybody who brings up these other things is trying to diminish this work that he did by bringing up these other things. Like we can't worry about that because that ain't got nothing to do with nothing. That's the faultiness in his manness and his humanness. We're not gonna talk about that. We only gonna talk about this heroic stuff that they did. And so not either knowing, caring, I'm not sure how that impacts the people who in our community who were the people who were the brunts of these things, right? And not seeing how there always has to be a separate story for us that generally only we read, right? A lot of black men have read Asada, but that's full stop.
Starter pack, man.
Full stop, right? Because how many times I hear black men say things like, black women let white women trick them with feminism. And I'd be like, kill me.
Those guys are reading.
Like,
whatever.
like, oh, we taught white women how to fight for themselves. Like they just, like, but like in their minds, that's and I asked, have you ever named one Black feminist scholar? They have no idea. They don't even know who they are, much less read their work, right? So it's like we're just like this, like, and it's challenging. I'll just say that it's kind of like when we read the Feminist Manifesto around this idea around like the way Black women have to engage hip hop. It's like you have to like. You either have to divest from being Black and like engaging in like Blackness and popular Black culture, or kind of like dissociate to deal with it because it's always so toxic for us, in the way that we show up in those narratives. And so, I think the fact that you thought it a cautionary tale, I find remarkable because I don't think.
And you know what? And I like what you just said. It's like this feels like we're condoning a man's behavior because it's just what men do.
Well, maybe because they did something special.
But it's almost like, but Will said like a man. Like, remember how you talked before? You said your friends, they'll talk about like maybe dogging women out or something crazy or being misogynistic, and people almost accept that, almost like, oh, that's just the way they are, as if it's okay. Remember Bell Hooks in her book, the book we read in here, she said. She used the example of people saying, "Oh, a man just got to do it. Like if you don't give it to him, he got to have sex." She went on to say, "Well, is he an animal, like a dog or something? Like you're saying that a man can't control his doing it like a woman, because you expect for a woman to be able to control it. So we're saying that men can't control it, as if it's just what a man does. He just got to have sex, right?"
Like, I don't.
And it's felt the same way. Like we're saying, like, okay, he was robbing, stealing. When he was like, I don't do it to Black people. Dude, you doing it to innocent white people. Like, you're just robbing people. It's not okay. It's not okay.
So,
I mean, it comes up in a lot of spaces.
Right. I'm a little. Part of the thing, and so okay.
We got here.
So maybe part of it. I'm trying. So I'm reflecting back on one. One of the people in my lives at that time was a bookstore owner who was helping me to identify books. So one, I'm wondering if my conversations was also instructional because I'm bouncing this off of other older guys.
The ability to talk about that stuff works wonders.
Right.
A lot of people don't get that.
So I can't remember, but I was also surrounded by other people. And I was reading, and some of my coworkers were Black women. So I was in conversation with people, right? So I wasn't just like off, isolated, right, in my reading. But on the other side, like, I'm trying to figure who the hell are y'all? Again, I'm not on social media. Right. I don't engage with these people. I believe that people are saying these things. I hear some of these things like as just stuff on TV or whatever. And I don't hear people. I don't engage with people who are actually saying these things, right? So I'm just trying to.
It happens a lot, bro. Like it's a common
off.
thing. People, I will say nowadays, I think it's talking about like the people excusing the bad behavior or saying that you're being a hater if you bring up somebody's flaws in the midst of other stuff. That's just that part. That happens a lot, though. Like it happens a lot. Like I don't know, pick and choose. Look, Diddy has defenders. Small, this is a bad example because a very small amount of defenders. The world's been very silent about defending Diddy on that. That's
very silent.
Very silent. Like it's been kind of interesting. But like I'm trying to think of like a recent example of somebody who of note that everybody was like, we don't gotta do this shit. Look at fucking Tory Lane and Megan, right? Like people still think that she did something wrong or shot herself in the foot. There's an entire community of people who genuinely believe this and believe that he is unfairly incarcerated and that whatever happened, she went chasing it and did. Like you have that's a million strong community. Like there are lots of people that do this type of stuff. What I will say is, it seems like nowadays it doesn't feel like it's as much just men getting the man. He just why you hating on this man? He's doing blah blah. I feel like it's just all encompassing. People tend to be very much Like if you bring up anything negative about somebody who's doing whatever, people like to call you a hater nowadays. But that happens a lot, bro. It's happens a lot.
So I mean, I get it. I'm not I don't have a big circle. I don't engage in a lot of, so I have to be like, because it makes no sense to me, right?
And
Like,
be educated. I'm not talking about the bros. I'm talking about people who are accountants, just regular middle class black people. And I would listen to these people talking these thing nights, and I'd be like, and I just feel very like, just look out the window, girl. Just be that person. Just look out the window, because it's like it just is. And like I think about things, and the person I think so. Like I love James Baldwin. Like he's mine. And think about the way that black people just conveniently forget that he's. I don't even want to say forget that he's gay. Like it's just not even part of the conversation. Nobody wants to bring it up. Everybody's like not like recognizing how big of a thing that is, and his identity, and the fact that the man had to run to Europe to like be free, and he had his own. He came back because he felt guilty for abandoning the struggle after Medgar Evers got killed. Like he just like, and even now, like people just kind of like, okay, well, you need to bring up that part. Like, why you gotta bring up the fact that he's gay? Because he is, right? Particularly when we're thinking about the Black agenda and how gay people can even get left off of the agenda. When we look at the people who be dying in these streets and putting their bodies on the line, it's them, right? So there's a way in which there are things that we might find unsavory that we won't acknowledge, right? MLK, it's like everyone knows that doesn't matter. Like he was a womanizer, like it doesn't matter, right? Because we're not going to tarnish these things that he did with these other kind of like personal flaws, because men are flawed, and we can't. That won't.
But so, do you think that in the case of MLK, that people don't acknowledge it because men are flawed, or because it's MLK? Because I think we have so few people who matter so much, and I actually don't know the answer to this question. I'm just asking, just genuinely curious. Like, we have so few people who are so significant to the world it's like universally accepted, even if it's for all the wrong reasons.
Right.
We all understand that white people don't really know who MLK was, and they don't get it right. But it's like, at this point, what does pointing out his womanizing add to the conversation that you're typically having about him? Because if you're having a conversation about MLK, it's probably more about what his philosophies and ideas were, as opposed to something that womanizing kind of fits into the conversation. Like, I guess yes. In the conversation about MLK, like what typically when that gets brought up, it's brought up just to point out that he's human, as opposed to point out some contradiction in ideology or something like that. Now, you can argue that being a womanizer contradicts the entire ideology, which is, I guess, is on the table. But, because for some people, some of their ideas do genuinely conflict with the way that they basically present. I don't know that was the case with MLK, right? Like, I don't know that, because of Coretta, but I don't even think of him as a family man. Like, I think of him as a singular, isolated, like, symbol of whatever. Like, I don't even view him the way I view Malcolm X, right? Where I view Betty as such an essential part of whatever, because, we know Coretta, but I just don't feel like, I feel like this is gonna be jacked. I feel like when people almost want to make sure they shoehorn, like, to make sure that we gotta always mention Coretta when we talk about Dr. King, because fair enough, without her, there is no him. Whereas I feel like with so many other people, like Malcolm X being an adulterer would be more of a thing, I think, just because it seems so far from who he became not even presented. Because I truly believe he walked it like he talked it, right? So that seems like that would be a contradiction, as opposed to Dr. King, who was really just seemed like this symbol of whatever it was we were doing, and we all put all our hopes and dreams upon him, and then he accepted that mantle and it killed him, right? Like, the other stuff almost seems like it doesn't even necessarily conflict with it. It's just like proof that he just was like everybody else.
Kind
you know
of
what I'm saying?
Amiri Baraka, right? He did all that preaching about like white devils and how he viewed white people. But at first he was married to a white Jewish woman, and then he had
That's
all
he
of
left
the-
that right.
he didn't leave it eventually.
No, yeah, I'm not saying it's a good thing. about it.
Right.
I'm just
I'm just saying, at one point he made that decision to marry her in the first place because they were married, despite all this conflicts. I think that's a good example of like where, you know, you're saying one thing ideologically, but then you're doing something else behind closed doors.
Like, yes, that because when I learned that was significant to me. I was like,
That was
Oh,
huge.
yes.
That was
Oh,
huge.
wow.
It's huge.
That's huge.
On top of his other comments, and that's another example, Amiri Baraka, we highlight him for the Black Arts Movement, for his poetry, but he has some awful ideologies and sentiments regarding people like homophobes. Well, he was a homophobe, but just the LGBTQ community, women, white women in particular, but definitely just women in general, because he like justified raping and stuff. Like he was awful.
see, so that's
Let
the
me just want to answer that real quick.
Yeah.
I think you're right in the sense, like, speaking of MLK, it's one of those things. Him specifically, it can feel like a detraction. Like, what would be the circumstance in which you bring it up? But I think when we're in groups of Black people, I think for Black women in particular, when talking about like how we show up in those spaces and movements, that like it's easy to forget that he was a preacher. He's a reverend. Like that is his. So just like
Fair enough.
Malcolm X was Muslim. Martin Luther King was a pastor. He is a preacher, right? And this idea that like the Black family is part of the movement, that like the family unit is the resistance. And if you ask many Black people now, that's everyone's thing, right? The Black family is the unit, is the resistance of like bringing back the Black family and all that jazz, right? I think
That's fair.
that's where that conversation comes up. I think talking about MLK, I like in another space, there's no reason to bring it up. But I think when we're sitting with us and we're talking with us about like the history of our movements and how to move forward, we have to hold those things accountable, because as we're digging at the bottom and new people are coming up, they have to do better, and they're not, right? Because the people who came before them do get passes for these other things in the name of, as long as you are doing these other kind of superhero things, we'll just kind of like sweep the other things that are destructive to every other Black person in the community under the rug, right? Because it feels like that's what it ends up being, is that the movements even still put Black men, cisgender, heterosexual Black men, at the forefront of our care. And everybody else is kind of like, well, come on over here, come on, sit down, be quiet, right? And that's how it can feel sometimes, right? But we are also still invested in the care and lives of Black men. Like that's not it, right? But it's also like, hi, what about us? And that like we sometimes, and we have to like swallow the harm in the name of like moving our community forward. And there's a lot of ways that we just keep swallowing. And I mean, yes, we move forward, but like the saying that none of us are free until all of us are free is not a joke. And I think we don't really coalesce around that in the way that we.
I mean, it just really sounds good.
Yeah.
It's a really good statement. But, you know, I do think people struggle with that, because I think we mean it when we say it until we're faced with what that actually looks like. Just like most things, I think, until you are put face to face with the thing that you have resistance to, you don't even know what freedom means, right? It's easy to say that I want all Black people to be free, right? You know, or my people to be free, except the people that I don't really rock with, as it turns out. The people I don't really rock with are the women that I'm beating, you know, because I don't really believe in their freedom, not the way that I believe in my freedom. You know, like I think that's probably the fallacy of freedom in and of itself. Like it really is dependent on the person talking at the time about what that freedom means.
So off the subject, but on the subject. So when you're talking about the men and whatever, so it's so off the subject, but we can move on if you want to. Like you saying, Diddy, why do you think everybody's being quiet?
Because he did that shit. He did everything that she accused him of, right?
So you think they're being, and all these other.
I think she did that strategically because she knew she was gonna take that money, but I got it out there. I put it out there. We go. You know how they do that in movement and like politics. They're like, let's just float a name out there and see what comes back. She floated that whole lawsuit out there. Next thing, like, y'all take your money. I'm done, y'all. Don't even worry about it. It's fine. But it's all out there. And it was like, nobody said nothing.
It's quiet as a mouse.
And now people starting to come out and talk about him. Now people like, yeah, actually, I was there when he broke Kim Porter's nose. I was there when this happened. I saw, like people are, like everybody's like, I mean, he did it. He's exactly who she said he is. That's why nobody. I think that's
think people are being quiet because they know it's true. It's just.
I think people are being quiet because nobody wants to defend him because too many people are both complicit and or have seen too much of it.
Right.
So it's like if I say something, that means I was there, right? Like I saw it, or they got to come out and be like, yeah, Diddy's trash. Like I saw this happen. Like we saw it with Cassie because it was such a long period of time, whatever. But he's been like this since the beginning. I think that's why nobody got anything to say because
he is what he is.
Even if you know what I think also did it when she said that Kid Cudi's car, he threatened to blow up Kid Cudi's car, and Kid Cudi like, yeah, my car got blown up, y'all. And the thing is, we don't even know if these, but it's like, wait a minute, what? Like that? It seemed too unrealistic until you get confirmation that, yeah, man, actually my car did get blown up around that time. It's like, wait a minute, like this is real. And then anybody else in that universe is.
And I guess the people who are fooling with him and typing fooling with him, you're kind of indicted because you probably have seen it. So you just gonna be quiet too.
Or if you're the women in that,
it's a safety thing. Like you don't want to die because going up against a powerful man. I'm sure that's the pigeonhole that Cassie and many others were feeling. Because again, Kid Cudi, the blowing up of his car is just one example. Like that's what we know. Let's think about all the other hits we probably don't even know about or won't even mention. Or someone just sent like a kind of sign, like a flower, to someone's door just to remind y'all, keep your mouth shut. With a knife in it. Like like that's scary.
Yeah, I'm sure Puff has a bunch of text messages from people saying words like "hold your head," but publicly,
right.
Nobody want to be the dumbass who comes out and says something and they turns out
even Carisha
was throwing people downstairs and all this other stuff.
Carisha made a post about a Chanel bag or nothing.
I think it's trapped.
Young Miami.
We won't even talk about that.
Young Miami from City Girls.
City Girls, Young Miami.
Oh. Everybody quiet. I just was wondering, like, I mean, it's like
Carisha did her like a regular. She on live with the.
And I'm surprised the dude was like, "Yep, my car got blown up." Because he was like,
when you have all of that power and manipulation and money.
I mean, too many people eat because of him, right? Like it's the universe is too big. Yeah. It's hard. You want to bite the hand that feeds you, and I don't even know what that looks like nowadays, right? But
I mean, look at what's his name, Simmons. He ran off to some other country, so. Russell Simmons.
Is he in another country?
Yeah, he's in like the Philippines or something. I don't know where he's. He's somewhere. But
Chilling.
He dipped out.
Under a rock. Busting his kids on the internet.
I don't know. I have I hear what everyone is saying, and to me, I think the whole point is to, on one hand, books need to be read because we have to have a hard conversation about it. Mm-hmm. Like to me, there's no. I think that's the whole point, and it to me, it's a benefit. It's of benefit and note that he puts the shady stuff into the book because that's a brave thing for him to do because there are darts to be thrown at him, right? Like your what's the word I'm looking for? Your reputation, your in history can now forever, right? Like you're put on blast. You're very vulnerable now. And I think to have the conversation to see who the whole person is because it's not just, and I always kind of push back on it, the generalization thing about black men, about men overall, is a thing that really bothers me. Because to the bigger point about freedom and individual responsibility, every person, black, white, gay, Christian, Muslim, or whatever, is responsible for their own actions, right? And we have to hold those individual people to account for what they do versus like the generalization thing. It rubs me the wrong way because that's not what freedom is.
Right. But if a critical mass have this starter pack,
but hold on, so and again, so the start. So there's two things for that. So the starter pack, one, I think, which is actually funny because my books wasn't create a starter pack. Right, we have our essential reads, right?
Y'all,
But it is. It's 100% true. And part of it is the lack of books that were written about Black folks of significance, of taking the history of these biographies and memoirs to put out there for that are okay and that the school's actually okay to read for young kids. It was like, oh, you gotta read Malcolm X. Malcolm X was good, but that wasn't a book that resonates with me. That's why I love.
For real?
No.
This book resonates with you more than that book?
This one,
because I think that book walks so this book could fly.
I'm not disagreeing with you on that, but for me personally, the book that resonates with me is this one and A Beautiful Struggle. Malcolm X is not in my top 5. Because for me, I wasn't a kid that got into a lot of trouble. Right? For me, what I needed, and that's what I saw with Malcolm X, was he was a kid that got into a whole bunch of trouble, did a whole bunch of problematic things, went to jail, freaked out, scared everybody in jail, right? And then he met someone, started reading, and got his life on track. But that wasn't my life. I could not associate with that.
Should have went to jail, bro.
I know, right? And then I would have, but I didn't.
That's the whole
It
point.
had you-
it's funny you say it because this feels
It had you
like
learn.
I was talking to the guy who works in the gallery right here.
Mm-hmm.
So hearing his story, this book reminds me of more of a DC type of life from his perspective, because he was saying like, a lot of kids, we were talking about why the kids so out of control. He was like, well, they blamed us for crack. We blame the kids for social media. They didn't do this to themselves. We're blaming every generation. So he was saying kind of like, what if you're a kid in DC who, let's say your mom is on crack, your daddy strung out. They've created the whole community to be afraid of you. Right now, everybody's afraid of Black boys now, and all the Black boys ain't carjacking. What do you have to lose? What do you have to lose by carjacking you and killing you? Because you scared of me anyway. You scared of me, I'm gonna get you, right? So when I read this, I was thinking this feels almost, because he said I want to make sure I stay in the streets. Where he was, based on this book, it was really sketchy areas where he's going, because places where police are highly police. They're being policed all the time. And most people, I ain't gonna say most people, I would say most people, if you're not in inner cities in this United States, you don't know nothing about this type of life. I never knew about police and all that. People say police stopping all the time. I'm like, what are they? Because I grew up in Alabama. We ain't never seen cops in our neighborhood. Because it's country. Y'all ain't doing nothing but throwing rocks. So this is not most people's story in this country, because most of us in rural areas in this whole country. You see, so when I read this felt more like, when I talked to the guy there, what somebody would write in Detroit, DC, Oakland.
It is a very
urban
response
yes.
to the civil rights, to all that.
And even like now, I'm not here. I was over here last night, and the dude had his trunk popped, and he had all this tissue and shit, right, against stuff. There was a bunch of people on the side of the car, so I'm thinking that's probably shit from CBS that they emptied out. And the police right there. And then I started thinking, but if it's an audience, people who need it, he got an audience for people who's selling it. Maybe it's okay that he emptied it out. But most people don't know about this stuff in this country because they're living in rural areas. So these stories are important for people to understand what it's like to be in a place that's heavily policed, and then what do a person do when you don't have it? Because when the guy explained, he was saying there's a big divide he felt between young people and us. We don't understand, and we ain't trying to understand where they're coming from. Now the media got us scared of Black boys, especially in DC. What you got to lose? My mama on crack, my daddy, whatever. I'm living crazy, and y'all scared of me. I'm gonna go and get y'all because you're scared anyway.
Sorry, we got a situation.
All right, Panama.
Oh wait,
All right.
your book.
Yeah.
I'll say wait for it.
So I don't know where did you grow up?
The sticks. of Florida.
The sticks, like I'm saying, so most people don't know about that heavy policing and all that. We just don't know about it. So even with me, it took me a minute to realize about policing. When people were talking about policing and all
So
that,
when I went to Chicago,
I had to understand what they were talking about.
I couldn't, because I met my boyfriend who was from Chicago, but I met him in Florida in college. And I used to call him paranoid because we would go to at the time it was still Eckerd's before it became CVS. And he would I would go inside, I'd come out, the car parked back, he sit on the hood. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm not about to be no Vic. Okay, Mr. Scary Man. Relax, right? Because I'm from the sticks.
Right, you don't know nothing about that.
You know, I don't really know nothing about that. Right? So, but then I moved to Chicago and I was like, oh, this is why he is like this. It is that city life is not for play. It is the pace, it felt like when I first moved there, it felt like, when they show those movies and they show people walking, they speed up the people walking, and that's how I felt standing in the train terminal. Where's everybody going? Why is everybody walking so fast? What? Good morning. What's wrong with y'all? People don't
Why the hell are you talking to me right now?
And
Why are you smiling at me? There's a problem?
I get on the train 7:00 in the morning for class. Good morning. And he was like, no, we don't do good morning here. Okay. Everybody.
The other guy taking notes oh, she's the one. She's
She's the suspect because I don't know what she about to do.
Right.
She up here talking to everybody.
We got to
Girl, it's still dark outside. Be quiet. So
and that's what she's saying. These books are important for people who don't get it, because I didn't understand about policing when people were first talking about the police brutality. I didn't quite get it at first. It took me to be living to read books like this to realize these posts were doing jump out.
It's a different kind of surveillance, though, and I think when we read "There As We're Watching God," that was to read about what it means to live in a rural community as a Black person, in the way that there's silence around the way that we are policed and surveyed, and to understand that everybody has about the way you are supposed to move.
Right.
I think urban spaces are just more blatant about the way people are policed because of the pace and the concentration of people. It's just I think a more obvious way of policing versus growing up in the sticks in the South around just this understanding of
where you're supposed to
be.
be. Don't go over there. Don't go over here. And if you just stay in your areas, you're good.
But so also think of it like this: strategically, if you are a occupying force that is outmanned, right? Let's just think about it so art of war, right? You are an occupying force. You are outmanned. You do have better weaponry, but it's 20-1. You have to, your objective now is to intimidate, to keep those 20, 30, 40 people that you're having to keep at bay thinking 2, 3, 4 times before they act, right? So when you get to an area like this where the critical mass is way outnumbers you, you have to be more, as you were, blatant in showing your brutality.
Right, I agree.
Because I can't, if 5 of y'all start out acting up, right? They put all the people in front of the Capitol. The white folks said, we ain't scared of you.
Period.
There's more of us than there are of you.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to do, I'm going to take this flagpole and shove it up your whatever. Right? And that's what they did. Because they don't have the fear that we've been having 400 years of intimidation, genocide, whatever. They'll blow a damn city up. My wife cried every time she dropped by through Tulsa, her hometown. You know what I'm saying? So this is to me, right, and I'll go back to your earlier point about the Black Panther Party. Yes, mistakes were made in the beginning, right? There were young people, they did not see the bigger picture. But what he was attempting to do, and this is the thing that when we think about it, he understood the law, right? They walked around with, was it the Bill of Rights or whatever? What are my rights? You can't just do this to me. And it's those things that put most of the fear into Hoover and the California administration. Because now we have, and this is, we're dealing with people who are willing to put their life on the line and they're willing to not back down and use the law to their benefit, right? The thing about white folk in this country, they get to exploit everybody because they write the laws.
Mhm.
Now, if someone starts turning those laws against them, now they have power. That's what scares most white folk. Like, oh, well, if you do this and you give them that, then they're going to just do it to us. No, we ain't you, right? But that's their inner fear. But it's some of those, not all of this, some of those things that they were doing is a very urban response to the brutality and the racism that they were dealing with. And I think that is the genius of Huey Newton and the founders of the Black Panther Party, because it became in a lot of those urban areas in Chicago, right? And also trying to connect with other, not just Black folk, but Chicanos. Like, if you were poor, right? That was the whole issue with Fred Hampton in Chicago, right?
Mhm.
It ain't just Black folk, we poor people.
Poor white immigrants.
Right. So we all need to come together and figure out how to push back against this thing. That became the danger of it, right? Because that's what they realize, again, it becomes, we are an occupying force and we are outnumbered. And when they get to the point when they are no longer scared to die and they're willing to put their life on the line for their actual freedom and dignity, then yes, we're going to figure out COINTELPRO becomes an essential part of the government's response
Mhm.
to try to quell, this resistance. So I think, and to me, that's why you read a book like this. You read because what he did and what he was trying to do was admirable. But reading it and seeing the behind the closed door stuff, hey bro, like, how do you do this without that? You know what I'm saying? And that's the conversation I think you have when you give it to a guy that's 15, 16, 19, 20 years old. Like, dude, you don't want this done to your mama. This is not how we, this is not how you roll. Like, I'm not even sure how, like, dude, that's just wrong.
But you know what's so problematic with this, Derek, is that he says, I was studying law to become a better criminal. That's what he said in this book, to become a better criminal. So my point is, if he had said, I'm studying because I want to liberate my people. So when I get in trouble and everybody else get in trouble, I'm gonna pull out this knowledge so I'm gonna get free. He said, I wanted to become a better criminal. So that's why I read the book. But then the Black Panther came and then he was able to use it. But originally, to me, this is wasted talent. This dude, the stuff that he's reading, that he taught himself to read, these are high level books that the average person ain't gonna just read and get it. Like, you're a brilliant dude, but he's just young and foolish.
There's a lot of brilliant criminals.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what I'm saying.
That's my whole point. But that's what I'm saying. It felt like for him and all the other ones, it's like a wasted thing because like now, had he got a little bit older and wiser, had he been able to overcome the drugs and all that, like think about it, he could have been.
But what was the pathway though? That's the thing. It's like where was the pathway for his brilliance?
Remember, he was in college though. Remember that?
But how did the pathway from that?
Right,
to,
like where was the pathway? I think
he had a pathway. That's just me.
I think he
he did.
Clear of a pathway. You're seeing the pathway because you're like a bird's eye view looking at him, right? As a
You may not have seen it, but he was in
college,
college.
living in his body. Going to college was him buying time. I think he was biding time, trying to figure out what am I going to do with myself. College allows you to buy time because it wasn't like he went to Berkeley or Stanford. He went to community college.
Crossed 5 minutes.
So he could go and come, right? And so I think he was biding time, trying to figure out like what am I going to do with myself because I have all of these things going on inside of me, and there's nobody to even really talk it through with in a way that's healthy. Because my daddy just gonna tell me to do the straight and narrow, go to work, go to work every day, put on your britches, go to work and do that. Then, my sonny man gonna be like, sell these drugs, bro, get this money.
Right.
You take care of yourself. Then, Melvin's going to college and it's like, that's cool, but y'all don't really be doing nothing. Y'all just sit around and talk about stuff. And so he was trying to figure out like, where do I fit in to all of this? And we cannot underestimate, he underestimated the impact of that year he spent in solitary confinement. The way he
Oh,
talked
yeah.
about it is like, I don't know why it didn't break me, but it didn't, sir. It absolutely broke you. It absolutely did.
When you came out,
Mhm.
yeah.
It absolutely broke you. There was literally no way you come out of that okay. It's just not possible, right? And so I think when you,
And that's the
when you're
ego. Like you said, he said, I wasn't broken. Yes, you were.
but it's ego. But the thing about the ego is protective, right? Like the ego, we're all self-preservation is our first line of as a human being, biologically and psychologically. You have to create a story, a narrative, to like stay sane. Like, and he talked about creating. He had to like go into like vivid imagery, in vivo imagery, in the solitary confinement to try to stay sane. And so when you come out, and we all do this. If we think about our lives, when you hear people talk about their lives, we all make up narratives
Right.
about our past to help us make sense of our present. Particularly if there's something in our present that we don't like or we didn't plan for, we create a narrative from our past to help us manage our present.
My daddy, my community,
Just
Yeah.
all of it, right? Like anything. And so I think the things the small, like we're talking about, they're talking about singledom of people right now. And I hear a lot of people, my girlfriends, everyone like, well, if I had got married when I was young, I'd been a terrible wife. How do you know that?
Yeah.
How do you know that you've been a terrible wife? You don't know that. You're saying that because you need to kind of like create a narrative to make being single at 40 okay. You say, I would have been really bad at marriage if I got married when I was younger. But you don't know because you didn't get married, right? So I think everybody does it, no matter race, for whatever your life circumstances. And I think that's what he was doing. Like I had to create a narrative that I can like live with and stay sane, because I honestly don't know what I'm doing.
Oh yeah.
And
it
the
was
world
definitely
is not
clear
open.
that. And then he
There's
had the
no
brother.
one to like
yeah.
guide me in a way that feels authentic to me. Everything else feels like it's inauthentic. I don't want to live like my daddy lives. I don't want to live like Sunny Man lives. Melvin, you own something, but that quite doesn't fit either. And because of being a black man in America, you don't get to just be whatever, right? And that's the privilege of whiteness around. You just get to be, and whatever you turn out as, and you have the space to create
and recreate.
a being
Yes.
and
And
recreate
recreate.
over and
It's
over
the
again,
recreation
Yeah.
part.
Yeah.
and nobody to bother you, right?
Yeah, I
You
saw
don't
that.
get
Like,
same.
him trying to find himself. Like when he said Sunny Boy, like, dang, I kind of like that. But then my Melvin. Then when he's trying to straddle, he's trying to find himself. And then the Panther come along. I'm not just, I think all that, we need young folks to be on the grind, to come in with the new ideas and push us a little bit further. We continuously need it, but it's just that he was so like, I was just like the stuff he was reading, it's just, he didn't read no.
He was reading in defiance.
He wasn't reading
Right.
Asada.
He was
He
using
wasn't reading
it.
Asada. He
like-
was reading, dang, I'm like, dude, Crime and Punishment, 800 pages.
The best way to break the system is to know the system frontward and backward. I
Right.
think that's what he was pushing to do. Like, gain all this knowledge, take all the things I know that are already written down so I can figure out the ways to break apart or move in between
Yeah.
the lines, which
That's
as a
how we win
criminal.
the game. Yeah, I
I mean,
mean,
that's what he said. He said, I want to be,
Well,
I'm doing to be a better criminal.
Like, people just view him as a black man, as a criminal. Like, he's just existing. They're like, criminal. Like, if he's not following what, I guess, like, talent intent expectations, right?
Mhm. Right.
and I'm actually glad you said it. And the thing is that we have to. I'm gonna say grace, but it's not the word I'm really looking for. Not everyone is W.E.B. Du Bois,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
Not everyone agrees with his approach to life,
I don't.
right? Not everyone agrees with Booker T. Washington
Mhm.
and his approach to life. And I think part of the thing, so on one hand, we need multiple organizations because it's not a one size fit all
Absolutely.
life, right?
Mhm.
This one thing, Mahogany Books is not going to work for every person, right? Saying culture needs to exist because there are people who want to read some super deep, very like some stuff that I walk in there, I'm like, dude, how did y'all even find this? You know what I'm saying? Like the people they have come out, I'm like, this is deep,
Right.
right? I'm like, dude, we just sell a lot of fluff stuff around here compared to what they do. But
You need it.
people need that. Some people need to have both, right?
Mhm.
I need to go here for my light and whatever. When I'm ready to get in,
Read the ISIS papers.
Man, I'm about to go in there, you know, and they got ISIS papers on like 10.
Yeah.
Like we got ISIS papers, but we have. So we need organizations with different visions and different approaches, and I think part of, and I feel like I'm on one hand I feel like I'm defending because it is a favorite book, but I also want to try to. It's my firm belief, like one of the things I want to be one of my lasting actions, like in my life, is to try to. I'm part of why I believe I'm naive is because I believe that we can be more open-minded and conciliatory to people in their different views and faults, right? Instead of you made this mistake, pegging them, and there's no way to recreate. And it bothers me because white folk do it all the freaking time. They make mistakes. This MF is about to become president again.
Don't speak that
Please
to
don't.
existence.
And I'm just saying, they're going to nominate this fool again.
Even if he don't become the president, it's the idea of the Republican Party. They're going to nominate him.
Hold on, he's not even going to any debates.
Mm-hmm.
He's willing, and he has a 40, 60 year list of bullish, of women, of doing the most egregious thing.
Egregious.
Mm-hmm.
But they're willing to
Stealing.
let him be president.
And the
again.
Republican Party gonna nominate him.
So why?
And they don't even like him.
They
Like
don't
the real,
like him.
real
They don't
Republicans
even like
don't
him.
even like him.
So we can't sit here and have a conversation about people and the mistakes. Yes, homeboy, and that's my whole thing is that to read this book and to understand that this is in a nice way to say it, a complex and complicated individual, right? He did some good things. He did some terrible things. That in-between space when he wasn't out there talking in front of people, dude was hella shady. Does that mean that what he accomplished, his ideas, the things that inspired me, inspired all these other people to do more good things than the shady things, without that time, those ideas don't get put into the ether. It doesn't inspire other folk. And I think that's the thing that to really give Black folk more grace to be able to be what we're asking, human. And that piece where it's like we cancel ourselves too much. Historically, contemporarily, we are quick to do it because we're holding ourselves to this higher standard and white folk ain't doing it. They don't care. They are about winning.
But the
At some point, we
consequences
have
for
to.
us, though, are more dire, though, right? So sometimes, in our comparison to white people and what they're doing, it's a false equivalency because the consequences of Donald Trump doing what he does for the white community is different than the consequences of if there was an equivalent of Black equivalent of Donald Trump. There is not, but if there was one, how that would impact us because we're such a small. We have a different history, and there's a way in which, and on the opposite end, right? The positive impact of Obama is why we have Donald Trump.
Yes.
They received Obama and the Obama effect as like a slave rebellion. Because we know after every slave rebellion, the enslavers became more ruthless, right? Because it was like, oh, we got to make sure that they don't try this more again, right? And so we have, at least in psychology, so many studies about how Black children's collective self-esteem, their self-efficacy, all of a sudden, literally out of nowhere, just went up significantly just because he was there, right? And so it was just kind of like, oh, we can't have Black people starting to think that wait a minute, everybody simmer down, right? So we think about how that impacted the small group in a good way, the same way that those things can impact us so negatively, like how it can also do the opposite for us when we have someone who's a figure like that who has these other things that are, and not just, it's because all transgressions are not created equal, right? So, you know, I think things that we do to each other really undermine our movements, right? The borrowing the money, you know, stealing the car, whatever. Some of the things that we do relationally to each other in these movements that get swept under the rug, I think really derail us because we lose steam and it never gets passed on because there are so many hurt people in the thing that when the person dies, it falls to pieces because people don't have buy-in because of how they get treated. And particularly when there are people who are doing the backbone work to make it run, then when the person that everyone's kind of like laying on the line for or like ignoring those things goes away, they go away too.
I think so. In part, I feel like that's you're helping me to you're entrenching me even more in the idea, in my belief, because it has to not be about the person.
It shouldn't be.
Like, so if we come to find out 2 years from now that Obama has some trouble, because what we're doing now is we're putting Obama on an MLK plane, right?
The pedestal.
On that pedestal, right? So he can do no wrong, and we got to keep it hush, hush, hush. Guess what? The dude is a person. He might have some problems, right? There might be some stuff that come out that. So what? Does those kids, the impact that those kids had, that he had on those kids at that time, to try to do more, achieve more, think better of themselves, did that go away? Because he had these problems? That initial impact on those kids at a time is that initial impact, and it helped to elevate their self-esteem.
Yeah.
And we have to, so for me, it's separating it's the movement that is the most important thing, not the person. So if we deal with the person as a person and understanding that, dude, like you said, all transgressions are not created equal. So if you transgress over this level, bruh, you're gone. But this thing got to move forward, right? We have to deal with them as a person. And okay, you had this level of transgression, it's a misdemeanor, fine. Maybe, you know, we do like you, Mr. McMahon, and we send you off, give you a retirement package, and you get your benefits. But WWE still exists. You're still going around the globe doing all these different things. So to me, so that's what I mean in terms of like how we operate our movements, our organizations. For them, the ultimate goal, the win is the bigger thing, not the person.
Right.
And for me, that's what I'm trying to figure out is how do we ultimately say, how do we build institutions that are generational, that continue to impact that initial seed of good thought, of good action is the thing is more important than my bad behavior.
Right. But what happens is to not replicate the white patriarchal structure, which is what all of our organizations do. Right. So the idea is that there is a man who they decide who is the best man to be this representation of this structure. Right. And it sets us up for that every time. Right. And so Black Lives Matter, which sometimes whatever, but the thing about the Black Lives Matter movement, which made it successful, which they hate, is that because the way it was structured, and this idea that there is no leader, made it so that even when they brought out all this stuff about like the houses they bought and all the money, I mean, they was talking about those women in particular, but it didn't do nothing to the Black Lives Matter movement, nothing, because they made it very clear we are not the Black Lives Matter movement. Like, it is a movement; it belongs to everybody, and you're free to do however you're going to do in your particular city and community. We have some manifesto of kind of like how we think about Black Lives Mattering, but ultimately nobody is a leader of this thing. Right. And I think that is the mistake. And the reason that I think that happens is because of the United States and the way that it's structured around particularly Black men, and this idea around manhood and the way that Black men have to earn their masculinity every single day, that when they find that space, that's why when you think about churches, there's a pastor, but when you look at the church, women run Black churches, right? But the head is a man, right? And I think that there's just a way in which when we don't take a step back and figure out how we can move our movement forward and distribute and disseminate, dissipate some of that and just deconstruct some of that, we'll continue to find ourselves in a place where all of it falls on one person's head when it should not. And it's usually a man because we live in a patriarchal society. In a lot of ways, we replicate that. And again, white people did not invent patriarchy. I hate people like we got it from white people. Patriarchy existed in Africa before we met people. But I just think that like we can't operate that. We can't afford to operate that way in a lot of ways because it creates this that you are on a pedestal, right? Because that's what happens in places like the church when the pastor do something wild, like cheat on his wife, and it's just like now people not going to church. I don't go to church because pastors cheat on your wives. Like, what that got to do with Jesus? Nothing. Like your faith should not be attached to a human being. But people's faith be attached to the leaders, and it's like, well, if the pastors cheat, well, they ain't no. And listen, they ain't no hope for me because if he can't get it right, then like, what am I in here for?
Yeah.
Right. And so
I
I
like the role, but
yeah, I'm just not. I don't think it's all black men. I think we always get this conversation all the time. It's not all. I think there's a critical mass of the way that we operate. And the thing about it is that I hate it for black men because I find it very dehumanizing. The way that there's like this like having to chase something that you already have. You were a man because you say you are. You don't have to prove it to nobody. You don't have to do nothing special. Like you just are. And I think that like in a lot of some of these movements when we create these things. And I feel like that's why he ended up dying on crack because he just couldn't figure out how to like grasp that thing that made him human in a way that felt authentic to him. And he tried all these different ways, and it ended up having him die in a way that was far less than the glory he deserved for all the work that he did and all his great ideas. I was asking about the Kennedy Center thing. That's really
what Kennedy Center?
you said like things that go on in the Kennedy. Every third Thursday or something.
Oh, it's the Phillips.
Phillips.
The Phillips. And there's one coming up after 5 next Saturday, next Thursday.
Oh, I forgot. I was like, ugh.
What's your
Last
Let me
thoughts.
text it to you.
Last thoughts.
I got a few more thoughts. More than last thoughts.
Well, this is your favorite book, so maybe you should say an after hours extended
Well, I
version.
mean, it's not.
It's 8:10.
Oh, it is 8:10. I'm sitting here looking
see?
at my thing
Yeah.
that says 152. I'm saying I think I have 8 more minutes. Okay.
No.
I'll hear your last thoughts. We started late.
Now, come on.
We did start late.
Yeah.
I'll give it that.
Yeah, so that's why I'm looking at 152. I'm like, oh, we should talk about last thoughts. I got time.
Okay.
I'm looking at 2 hours on that thing. So I guess at the end of the day, I do have a I have a knee-jerk reaction to the idea of like this patriarch, because my family, like the dominant people, the people who women, very woman-led family. Have you met my wife? I mean, right?
I'm gonna text her right now.
No, she's probably watching right now. Like, it is a. I think we, and again, I come back to the necessity to have the open conversation absent of the generalization, because it forces us to separate ourselves from this idea that a patriarchy has to exist or a matriarchy has to exist. That there are people who are in partnership and relationship with each other. There's people who are better at things that take natural leadership position, and there are people who are better at, you know what, being followers, right? And that's what they're comfortable in. So having the conversation in total about the good and bad components of what they did or did not do, I think is where we need to be at with the books. And the reason I say in comparison to white folk is because what I'm hoping to drive to ultimately is thinking of it. And I know there are some people who I'm just thinking of, like some people I've had conversations with who disagree with me vehemently. But the idea that even if I look at book selling as a revolutionary act, right? For me, it is. There's some people like Derek, you ain't doing ish, right?
It's revolutionary.
But from the revolutionary act is to ultimately get people to really change the way they are thinking about the concept of what can I accomplish and what can't I accomplish. And once we start, to me, equalizing ourselves, what this group of people are willing to do to win, we may have to do, right? You may have to stretch yourselves and give yourself the same type of grace, the same type of space and boundaries to really be able to fight fairly. We have not fought fairly. It's not been not fair. It's not been a fair fight since we got here. We've been fighting according to their rules. And they say, oh, well, you can't do that. You can't fight like that. Yet they picking up dirt, throwing it in your eye, they bringing weapons to the ring, they're doing everything. No, you're not supposed to use your hands. You can't, you hit me too hard. Like, what? You sitting there stabbing me. Like, this is what they do. And they expect us to respond in a civil, in a God-fearing way, right? And that's the thing with Christianity, right? That, oh, you can't fight like that. Dude, that's what you do every day. And if ultimately we really want to get to a point of getting real equity and equality and fairness, we have to give ourselves the ability to step more into that space to fight the way they fight the fight. And David Walker's Appeal was one of the books that helped me understand that. This guy was very committed to his Christian views. But when he talked about, and this was a guy who wasn't born a slave, because luckily his mom wasn't a slave, his dad was enslaved. So when he was born a free person. When his mom died, he up and left, right? Because then it becomes whatever at that point. But he was very committed. But he said clearly in his writings, I don't pray to their God, because the person they're praying to is not my God. What they're doing, that's not godly stuff at all. So if we're going to have to fight this fight, I'll love my God. I'll be a God-fearing person, but I'm going to fight the way that it needs to be fought. So he talked about guerrilla warfare, all this stuff, and I'm just saying that we limit ourselves in our ability to really get to the point where if we want to change the way things are for us, we have to allow more space. So to study a person like Huey Newton, to read and study Fannie Lou Hamer, Shirley Chisholm, they all have to be on the table. It doesn't, like, gender, sexuality, none of it matters.
It doesn't.
Right? To me, the biggest thing about James Baldwin is that this dude is so prophetic. He was a gay man. And the stuff he's talking about, we're just starting to wrestle with right now. Mm-hmm. He saw this years ago. And it didn't change his masculinity. Like, none of that was changed because of who he loved. But but because he was open with it, and that's why I need to watch this Bayard Rustin one, because I saw that.
I want to see it.
That clip that he said, where he said, you know what, the day that I was born a black man, I was born a homosexual man. Mm-hmm. Right? It's not separate. Mm-hmm. And I'm still here fighting the fight.
I can't wait to watch that. Thank you.
Exactly. So I think we have to start giving ourselves the space to study and read the people for who their whole person. Take it in. You're right. Have someone hopefully that can help walk you through it to give you the proper viewpoint. Yeah.
Kids, grown folks,
mixed.
You know what I'm saying? Like, all different types.
I think all mentors aren't good mentors.
No.
Like, they used to be like, the boys need mentorship. Don't let
from who? Right.
From who?
But that's why this is so important, because it says question everything, question everyone, and don't just take one resource. I think a lot of these kids get caught up in one resource of how they're getting everything, especially, unfortunately, with it being YouTube and all of that. Right. Kind of going on there.
Read this and read Taste the Power at the same time.
Right. Yes.
And the ease of it.
They need to start
on YouTube. There's just
Is that no? It's you got to take multiple sources. Anyone who studies, journalism or just basic critical thinking, right? It's just basic critical thinking. You take more than one source.
Right.
I really got. I'm so tired. It baffles. It ain't gonna baffles me. People who just don't read it all right. So I be thinking, where are they getting where do you get
YouTube University
or the people around them, right?
Not in a bad way, guys.
People around them.
I don't want to put readers on a higher level.
I am.
And not at all, because maybe people watch movies.
Let's take it back to Razor Blade Tears when what's his name? The white guy said some kind of comment that was clearly racist, and our guy Ike called him out about it. He was like, "Oh, well, I didn't know that was just something that had been passed down to me," because they're just taking one resource, whether that's family members, people who are coworkers, whomever. Like
the women, the part of the world that we occupy, we're gonna stay there. It's very hard to touch other parts of the world and meet other kinds of people just because of the nature of being alive. Like you just. Right, and the Reading Rainbow was not a joke. It gives you opportunity to open up the world and see that there are people who live differently and think differently than you. And there's a way in which reading forces you. It's different than like watching a video and somebody talking. You sit, you read it, you like, did I read that right? Like, and you can like go back. There's a way in which you can rewind in a book that rewinding on a TV screen just doesn't cut it. And so, while I don't want to put on a pedestal like they're better, but there is something.
There is something to
who don't read.
There is something, like she said, there's something to it. And then, like now, she said, like me, reading these books like this, it helped me understand police brutality. When you didn't come from that, when you didn't see them policing all the way around, and like Malcolm Gladwell, what's the one he talked about? Heavy policing. How that, all those books help you understand because you're not in an environment. You're like, why ain't tripping about the police?
Yeah,
you don't understand why they tripping.
That's why The Warmth of Other Sun is my favorite book because my parents are immigrants. So like that generational Black American experience, I don't have it. But from reading that book, I read it like 6 times. I feel like these are my grandparents, and I got to like hear this story about what the Great Migration looked like and the impact it had, and like the historical breaks that she took to like give the historical facts was like, oh, like it just brings you in a different place to be able to hear. Right, and think about what it must be like to be an older Black person in America at this time, which is why when the election were happening and people were starting to talk about like older Southern Black people in a derogatory way around like, oh, y'all just gonna vote for Biden because y'all like, don't you dare talk about older people from the South. They are not dumb. They are not slow. They're like, you don't even have any idea what it means to be 80 years old in Alabama, like, and have been in Alabama your whole life. Like, shut your mouth, right? And so, because you don't read and you don't know those experiences, because you're from New York, you're from wherever, from these urban places, you think people from the South and rural are like dumb and like unaware and like not knowledgeable about what's going on. It's like you in your little urban town don't know what it's like.
They don't
know.
know.
Be able to go out after dark to certain places. You have no idea what that feels like.
And knowing your place and
so I think
and the
that's what books
can
provide you.
It can do that. Even like this was, I mean, not that it's my favorite, but it was good to know. Like this is just good stuff to know. This was his life. This is what was going on, and you don't think about this stuff in California too. You think it's like you thinking they chilling over in Oakland.
Oh yeah, that Fruitvale, that station got me. I was like,
right.
Once it's done.
Yeah, you think about all the stuff he was saying. You thinking this is somewhere else, not California. Even when you talk about Warmth of Other Sun, the family that moved to California. I was like, people migrated to California.
Listen,
we think north. We think you wouldn't think about people going to California. That book was eye opening to me. I thought most people went north.
And now they're starting to have more. Jardine Nolan has a good kids book for young readers that talks about the migration to the West that we don't really talk about at all, because there are Black folks in Seattle, there are Black folks outside of Oakland, right?
And even purposely moved there for certain industries or certain opportunities that didn't happen, and then they create these urban areas, these experiences in these places that we don't think of, like in Detroit or Chicago or whatever.
And even like now, Jasmine Ward said the book she did now is about, she said, like that was New Orleans was the center of domestic, slave trade, right? So a lot of people don't know that, like that was the capital that she talked about. She reread Dante's Inferno, because you know New Orleans high. She wanted to go and recapture that in her brain and how that must have felt as a slave going down to New Orleans to be traded in the summer or any time of the year. Because it's even in the winter it ain't close. You see, so she said she had to reread it, but even for me, I knew that it was slave, it was traded inside. But I can't read the book to talk about New Orleans and how it was we love to go to New Orleans. At least I do. The capital. Me too.
Everybody loves it.
Yeah.
My history deep.
Yeah.
And reckless.
Yeah. So we do have to wrap because I am actually over 2 hours now.
Are we live?
Yeah.
Everybody read books. Come in here. There's so many books in here. Oh my God, it's crazy up in here.
So that's what I was going to end with, is that whether, like for me, this is a highly significant book and like just really kind of helped to set me on a path, like a defining book in my life. Everyone has it, but the point is to grapple with all types of books, right? Whether you agree with the person or don't agree with the book, or the person, it's grappling with it, and that's the issue right now, where we're trying to societally, at least from a certain mainstream society, is trying to stop
Thinking.
people from being able to deal with complicated topics and just romanticize and mystify the story of America and of what civil rights was and all this other stuff, whereas it's not that. And so you have to be willing to grapple with it, to disagree with the writer, to disagree with his lifestyle or some of the things that he or she did, but in there's something you can learn from everybody, right? And that's whether it's what they don't want to do that because they were wrong, or this philosophy is something I can adapt myself. But the thing is to grapple with it, and like that's where I want to come from, like the entire conversation on what we do here. So,
and last, I think that's what I tell my students, that you also can't even say that you have a position if you don't know the other positions, because you don't know why your position is your position.
Yes.
If you don't have any understanding of other positions, because you can't even say why that is your position when you have no knowledge of other positions. You have to know all the positions or other alternative positions for you to be able to say, no, I stand over here because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But if it's just like, I'm over here because my mom said so.
If you never put in a position to defend your belief, how is it really a belief?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I'm 100%. That's what's 100%. Okay. So I've already started this one. This is Panama's pick. I'm going to give it my very best effort.
You don't like it?
No.
It's not his genre.
I'm grappling with the stuff that. Okay, so I go from this to this. I'm like,
is that fluffy?
It's not fluffy. It has.
So from what I've been doing this as an audiobook, to be honest. And I've done it through Libro FM, because you can always get your audiobooks from MahoganyBooks through Libro FM.
Oh, and it's available in the library.
Or DCPL or PG.
It's a bad sign, guys. When it's available at the library, that's a problem. It must not be. How?
No. So honestly, what I will say is this: what I'm thinking. So my initial thoughts on it is like ballerina stuff, dancing. I'm like, oh God, okay, really, kill me now. But I'm enjoying the writer's ability to to describe this person and what she's doing, the dancing, going from French to whatever, because I guess ballet has French terms about positions or whatever. Like her ability to write in a way that really is so descriptive that I can see
The pure way.
or not even that, but like the not pain, but the uncomfort, like how you have to strain, which you have to put your body through to do some of these moves. The way she's able to express that, I am enjoying that part of it, because it feels like, okay, I can get into this character's though she has a love for dance, there's this pain part of it that she has to endure to do it. And the writer is doing a great job of connecting me with that piece of what the character is enduring. That makes me like, oh, okay, I can relate to that piece of it. So I'm enjoying the writing, and I'm figuring out like eventually, hopefully, come around more and more to the story, right, of a ballet dancer. Panama, you pick this.
Private dancer.
You know what I'm looking forward
So-
to?
Oh my
We
goodness.
will be reading this
I
in
just got it from
December,
the lab.
and the first conversation, the not the first conversation. It will be the first conversation of the 2024
January 5th.
calendar year. It's going to be on January 5th back here at Anacostia. So,
And maybe you'll have some libations for us to celebrate the new
yes,
year.
I'm sorry. I forgot. I have like, I was excited too. I had a whole bunch of stuff I was going to bring. So I'll have
Thank you
to
for
celebrate the
bringing
new year
First
with
of all.
libations so we can hang out so I can drink
Don't
while I
get
talk about
blessed.
that.
And as always, you know our
Where I
motto.
got it.
What's up, Mom? Black Books Matter?
Well, I hate I got it so early.
All right, guys.
Wait, and then-
Take care.
Peace out.
Bye, y'all. Read books.
No, for real.